Hey, this is John with NJ21st, and we're going to try something a little different this week. Going to put the legislative calendar on audio. I might do this once in a while, periodically, for like odds and ends that we don't end up writing full articles on. But they're still worth mentioning. Things that come up during the week. I feel like that happens a lot, and we don't really have the space or the time to deal with it. So this could be sort of a catch-all way of, putting that out there. Anyway, for now, we're just going to focus on the calendar, the legislative calendar in Trenton this week, which, with the exception of one meeting about the 250th anniversary of U.S. independence, is going to be pretty much all about the budget, and it's going to land in 2 days. So, next few days are basically opening week for the state budget. It's the first stretch of the public hearing process, and this is where the legislative starts its own fiscal review and starts putting the governor's budget, under the microscope. So this thing starts on Monday, March 30th at 10 at Newark at NJIT. And it's going to be the first major public hearing where folks are going to be able to weigh in on how the budget's going to affect them, their communities. You're going to see residents, local officials, stakeholders. And then on Wednesday, it's going to go back to Trenton, where the Assembly Budget Committee is going to have two back-to-back meetings. And the first one's going to be at 10, where they're going to hear from OLS, the Office of Legislative Services, and that's the legislators' nonpartisan fiscal staff. And they're going to present their perspective on the budget and their forecast. After that, the assembly's going to hear from the state treasurer, who's going to look at it through the administration's lens. Now, it matters because the legislature's fiscal staff, I can't say that word right. I'm not even going to try. Fiscal staff and the governor's fiscal staff are going to be side by side, head to head. And you're going to get kind of two, you know, variations of what this budget's going to mean. But if OLS projects less money coming in than the Treasury does, then legislators are going to face a bit of pressure to cut the spending. They might have to revise things, look for more revenue. After that, there's nothing. There's no budget hearings on Thursday or Friday. So everything again lands pretty much on those 2 days. So I think the biggest fights over this aren't going to be surprises. There's seven of them, and again, not none of them are really secrets. If you look online, people are already arguing about this. So the first one that is probably the most discussed is state New Jersey, and some people are looking at this as kind of like a trimmed version of the senior property tax relief program. Uh, Governor's trying to bring down the cost of that benefit to the state, so they're going to do that by capping income at 250,000, whereas before it was 500,000. And the maximum benefit is also going to drop from 6,500 to 4,000. So anybody making over 250 is not going to get this, whereas before you could make up to 500. And folks are not going to get any more than 4,000, whereas before you could have gotten up to 6,500. And the argument for that is basically the benefit should exist for people in the middle, and that folks that are bringing in 500K a year really don't need that kind of relief, especially in a budget year where cuts have to be made somewhere. And you know, trying to not burden folks in the middle class with a tax relief program that might benefit people that are making more than them. The second biggest issue is definitely, I mean, maybe even the first, to be honest with you, this is high, is going to be school funding, which has been a battle for years. So this budget is going to include record levels of aid for K to 12, but the fight's going to not be so much about how much, but how it gets distributed. So the governor is going to say that the budget provides about 12.5 billion in formula aid. It continue, it preserves some of the anchors that are meant to sort of mitigate year-to-year swings. So they're looking at a 6% cap on increases and a 3% basement on decreases. It also uses updated measures like actual special education enrollment and more precise wealth and income data. So even though the amount of aid is going to be high, you're still going to see some districts losing and others arguing that the caps keep them from getting what they would have gotten, um, before, what the formula otherwise would have produced. Third on the radar is transit. Um, so this has been a loaded topic, and people have been talking about this constantly. This budget gives about $1 billion in operating support for New Jersey Transit, includes about 765.6 million from the corporate transit fee. But some folks are saying that the way that's funded is still way too patchwork, and that the state shouldn't be dipping into things like the clean energy fund instead of um, relying on like longer term solutions, cleaner longer term solutions. So it's really a question of keeping the fares lower today versus preserving money that people feel needs to be used long term. Um, so that's going to be, I think honestly the fare reduction is probably going to win out. Next one is going to be about closing loopholes and in trying to avoid tax hikes on everyday people. Governor is looking to try to do that through corporate tax changes and enforcing compliance on stuff that's already in the books. So, governor is looking at raising more than 700 million through that loophole closing, improving enforcement. Obviously, business groups are going to look at that and say it's a tax increase with a mask. Um, and I think you're going to have fiscal conservatives arguing that as well. Next one is structural deficit. Even though the budget cuts it, it's still not on really solid ground. So you have some outside analysis saying that about 1.67 billion of deficit is going to stay, and that the surplus is probably going to drop to about 5.5 billion. So that's another big question: is whether the budget's just a real correction or a less dramatic version of the same thing. Another issue that's going to be interesting for a lot of local communities is the add-ons, and this is something that hits close to home. So the governor likes to talk about fiscal discipline, but the legislators always want a little room for local projects, grants, district level spending. What some folks would refer to as pork. Governor wants to rein that in. Um, Legislators are going to likely push back on that and defend it. This is something that a lot of municipal governments are going to be watching because those local add-ons to them matter. I'm going to say that a lot of times that's well, I'm not even going to go into my opinion on that, but uh, sometimes these projects just happen to show up right before elections. Last issue is utility bills, which again everybody has been talking about, and the governor is looking to offset that that rate pressure. Uh, but folks are concerned that the state is going to be using one-time resources or redirects to solve an immediate problem, which makes this kind of a cost of living and budgeting issue. And so people want the relief now, but the real issue is how we're going to pay for that relief in a way that it's going to be there for a while and not just disappear. So that's the tightrope. I don't know if this is the most unique or different budget fight New Jersey's ever had. A lot of this stuff is pretty familiar: property taxes, transit, school funding, structural imbalance, but it doesn't make it any less important. We'll see how it goes. All right, that's it for now. I will catch you next time.